Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Chat, if you're here, you're here. Out of this song, what's the name? You can go here and you can find it. It's called The Bard Tales. It was actually written for the show. Stank Attack. I got in touch with the composer because I love their music over on their Patreon. And I saw if they could collaborate with us to make a theme song for the show, and they did. So do check it out. Okay, let me move over the scene to the recap scene. So, hello, welcome out everybody. Good to see you. There is no episode tonight. It is the English versus Italian Euros final for football. I wouldn't usually take off an episode for a sporting affair. However, for England, this is very much embedded into the culture. And they haven't been in a final in 55 years. So I thought it probably makes sense to try and not compete with that and let everyone go and kind of choose to watch that one, as we'll be going on every week from now on for Godforged. So that is the plan. However, because that is starting in an hour, we're going to get things going pretty quickly here. Along with that, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking at first. I'm going to say to you guys, I'm not going to check out the chat until afterwards, because I've done a couple of recaps before, and I realized I go into kind of tangents, like I'll get asked a question and I'll go off topic for ages. And on one of the recent videos, I saw a comment which was like, hey, the recap goes here. This is when he starts doing questions. This is when the recap comes back on. So I'm going to do the whole recap. So if you've got any questions for any of the episodes or anything that's going on currently about the world, specifically about the world of Godforged and everything, or about episodes, about characters, etc., save that for when I've done reading all through the recaps. I basically just compiled about 6 pages worth of notes, and I'm going to read off that and kind of give you guys a bit of flavor. This is mostly for anyone who's just kind of looking, who kind of came in late, or is looking to get started with Godforged, but realizes that 50 episodes of an average of like 3.5 hours, that's a lot of watching to catch up on. So this is kind of a nice way to get from episode 35 all the way to episode 50 and be up to date for next week's episode of Godforged. So, welcome out, chat. I appreciate it. I'll get started into it. So, there's going to be a lot of conversation coming at you in just a while. Save on to those questions, chat amongst yourselves and whatnot, and let us start. But first of all, let me roll 20, and I can put some background music on for this. But yes, this beautiful theme is made by Tabletop Music Bazaar. Do check them out. All right, let me find some. I know the boat theme to start off with, because this is where episode 35 starts. All right, let me get the theme. And where are you? Where is it? Here it is. The Tithmore theme. So, episode 35. Familiar Faces. Having just arrived in Wolfguard, the party descend from their ship and enter into the town of Tithmore. They get welcomed into Wolfguard culture through a screening process where clerics check for werewolf bites, diseases, or other curses or undesirable objects you might bring into the nation known as Wolfguard. They get a feel for the culture. Wolfguard, unlike from where they came from, in Kessex, is a much more reclusive, solitary, and independent nation. They're a nation that tries to merge technology with magic. Also a nation that has been riddled with curses and problems such as the undead and werewolves. In Tithmore, they learn that the Soldiers of Sunrise are the ones who control this area, a military force that was first created to deal with the undead threat. And since then, paladins and clerics of the Order, along with any soldiers and volunteers, have been joining up to help do their part for Wolfguard. Around Tithmore, they discover that Cadven has a shop here, and learn quite quickly that actually Cadven's shop is located in a different plane to the material plane. and that by passing into one of his shops, you're really passing into his plane. They also gather up as many bounties as they can. 2, taking their interest over others. 1 is to try and convince an old man named Blue, over in his estate, to give up his land to the Soldiers of Sunrise, as it is in a highly defensible location. The other, to deal with a pack of werewolves to the west. Before leaving Tifmore, the princess that they had recovered on the sea disappears and abandons the group at night. She leaves behind a letter, informing them that she deceived them, but thanked them for rescuing her. Her name was Sarai. Episode 36, More Bark Than Bite. The group travelled northwest toward the Temper Woodlands to deal with a pack of werewolves. On the way there, they came across a sprite named Busy, which, in exchange for secrets, told secrets of its own. It warned the group of a guardian in the nearby woods, something that had attacked the lumberjacks in the area. The party encountered a gargantuan creature, only to learn that it was actually in fact an illusion, and it was much more their size to deal with. They defeated the creature before heading north. Episode 37, Both Bark and Bite. The group arrives at the Gather-Round. It's a campsite on a crossroads built over an old inn. The inn was known for its hospitality, giving free room and board to any who travelled through, as long as they paid in food. It had a broth that would continuously be added to over the years and given out to any kind traveller that passed by. When the inn eventually burned down, in kindness, the Gather-Round took on the same principles. Those who go there do not draw weapons. Those who go there, friendly, and trade in supplies. Charitable supplies. They sampled some of the local goods and learned of a circus coming into a town into the next few days. Notably, Fear did a sending spell on Mythis in this episode, the dragon that had captured Magnathor centuries ago. He was not best pleased to receive that, and informed her not to do it again. The group headed west and came across a group of werewolf hunters in the woods. Realizing that they might have rivals for their bounty, they push on north and find a lone werewolf in a tree. After a brief scuffle with it, Timothy removes the lycanthropy curse from him, curing him of his 50 years as a werewolf. The so-called hunters suddenly show up and reveal themselves not to be hunters, but instead hybrids, therianthropes, all capable of shapeshifting and carrying the were curse. Episode 38 starts with the battle against the hybrids. Its name is Dreams of Family. They battle against the hybrids and kill them off, and then learn the name of the cured werewolf, the one they saved, Harrion. Whilst raiding the hybrids' camp, Basil hears faint musical notes in the air, leading northward. The party agree to follow them, but rest for the night first. That night, they each have a significant dream. Timothy dreamt of being in the gardens of his mountain home, hearing his mother's humming. He saw her sitting beside a mountain spring, but woke before they could interact. He hears Basil say the word mother. Skull dreamt of an iced-over volcano with a descending set of stairs within. As he travelled down, he found a fire giant unfamiliar to him, working on an anvil. He heard Basil say brother. Fabia dreamt of her childhood, being escorted home to her warren by the elves that lived nearby, as she was so often scolded by them for pestering them. When she arrived home, she saw her extended family, all gathering around a meal outside. She hears Basil say family. Fia dreamt of her childhood as well, being in a cold, wind-struck shack. She could hear coughing in another room. When investigating, found a woman sat caring for a dying man on a bed, who drifted in his sleep. She hears Basil say father. Saphira dreamt of the cold plains of Fjordhelm. During a blizzard, she presses on towards a bubble, shielded from the winds. Inside the bubble, she finds Magnathor sat across a flame, an open campfire ahead of her. In the sky above, she sees the looming figure of Belamos looking down on him. She hears Basil say son. After each woke, having their dreams of family, they travelled toward the musical notes, leading them to the estate where they were coming from, of Old Blue. Episode 39, New Goals, Old Blues. At the entrance to Old Blue's estate, the group are greeted by the butler, Bartholomew Briggs, played by our first guest star, Crichton. He led them inside, informing the group that Old Blue wasn't fond of guests, and that he had turned away many wanting his estate, grown crankier in his years, no matter the offer. Old Blue was a bard in his younger years, and settled down with a more noble woman from Wolfguard. They had a large home in Coldwick, but had to leave all their possessions behind when the undead guard turned on the living in Wolfguard. Fleeing south, inside his estate, he left the last memory of his late wife, a portrait of her, down in the tombs. The group convinced Old Blue, with the aid of Bartholomew, that they could head to Coldwick to retrieve it. He agreed. He was also curious to hear that Basil had the ability to hear the notes coming from his home, realizing that the young half-orc had potential, as he was accidentally creating objects with his mind. Travelling upon carriages pulled by wickets, giant wood lice bugs, the group make good time and get to the border between the lands of the living and dead, before continuing on foot. They dispatch some harpies and rescue a satyr named Fignus, a prankster fae that had been continuously regrowing limbs, only for the harpies to eat them. He provided a 1 prank coin to Fabia. The group arrived just outside the town of Coldwick, abandoned. I've also realised that I forgot to change the episode number every time we're doing this, so now I'm just going to do this. My bad. That was one of the things I wanted to do, but it's absolutely fine. It's fine. Ten more to go. Episode 40, Webs of Deceit. I'm just going to change up the music now, because it's getting to the point where it's a little bit more... Let's do this one. As they get closer to the Deadlands. Webs of Deceit, the party discover that Coldwick has been infested by giant spiders, feasting on the dead that wander in. After disguising themselves as wandering zombies, they pass by the spiders, almost getting caught, before breaking into the manor house and closing the door behind them. Inside, they find a small robed man made of bone, and in other ways decrepit and web-filled manner. In the corner, however, the spider's broodmother awaits, ready to feast on the intruders. But they convince the bone creature that they mean no harm, and seek only the portrait in the basement of the manor. In return, they filled many vats with elf blood for the broodmother to drink, a favourite. They recovered the portrait, and Basil saw that Old Blue was once married to a beautiful half-orc lady that had similar eyes to him. Upon returning to Old Blue, the once cranky old man was now back to his former self. He eagerly gathered his things and departed, with Bartholomew from his estate, eager to see the world now that he had seen his wife again, a memory restored to him. Before leaving, he infused Basil with the secrets of creation magic, and left the group, not the military, his estate, entirely. Now, episode 41, Old Blue's Stronghold, the group had just acquired the entirety of Old Blue's estate, meaning that they could design it how they wish, add any additions such as a blacksmithing area, which is what they started with. They wanted to get some resources first and had to find some people to build them. Upon heading south to get to Tithmore to start buying those resources, they heard someone yelling from the distance. They came across Harrion, stood on a rock. At this point, I was calling him Garrion because I forgot his name, and I mixed up H and G. But you know, there we go. He was trapped on the rock due to bullets attacking those who were escorting him back to Tithmore. The group dispatched the bullets, killing them quickly, and helped save Harrion. Harrion. He agreed to be their carpenter back at their home, and began building a blacksmithing area at the estate. When the party arrived at Tithmore, they were paid for their werewolf job and informed Lieutenant Sada. Again, at this point, I'd forgot that Lieutenant Sada was an old man, and now it was a young lady. But that's fine, because I had two characters mixed up there. That's just the daughter of the Soldiers of Sunrise, that they were in control of the estate. Episode 42, The Circus of the Count. Whilst in Tithmore, the group play a prank, making Fabia look like a were-rabbit, which inevitably causes a lockdown for the town for the night. Halio also informs the group that they were heading back to Wolfguard to pick up the refugees that were left there. Sorry, heading back to Steel Harbour to pick up the Wolfguard refugees. They venture to the gather-round to see the circus, which transformed into a series of fun fair activities and shows such as a puppet show and a play about a young girl wanting to be a local crier. When entering the show itself, they enter into a tiny circus tent, passing through a bubble, only to find it's much bigger on the inside. The showman is a Largo named Lucky Bucky. I think we should probably play this kind of music for this one. The show has clowns, a magician, a gluttonous owl folk that can digest anything. By the end of the show, they discover its real purpose, though. It is the circus of the court of wonders. Above them, in what was once a fake star-lit night, looms the faces of several arch-fae. The true show is one of challenges for a few small groups. The party volunteers and finds himself face-to-face with an enormous owl folk, learning that the other groups that went before them failed. The true form of the creature from the circus. Episode 43. Tickets, tickets, tickets. Over the course of this and the next episode, the party had to fight challenge after challenge, each of them seemingly themed toward their individual skill sets. They battled a gluttonous owl folk by poisoning it with cabbage, conjured by Basil. High-flying fairies brought down by a bell that Saphira had to ring, and even some acrobatic pirates where Fia was sent flying out of a cannon. Upon winning in each challenge, they gained tickets to be spent at the end, if they wished, at a gift shop. Episode 44, Red, White and Fae, continued this. The party then continued through the other half of the circus, defeating puppets that were scared of Skuld, and a magician where Fabia had to hop into his hat to kill him. Eventually, the party battled and killed the final challenge, a pair of clowns defeated by the squeaky hammer of Timothy, which they had enchanted previously at Cadvens, before being congratulated by the showman Lucky Bucky. In 2 revelations before leaving the tent, the party learned that the circus was set up with them in mind, each challenge designed around them. From information fed to Lucky by Busy, the fairy friend from a few episodes ago, the sprite that had traded their secrets. He'd been following them around. The second revelation was that they had been in the Feywild during the circus, and weeks had passed in the material pain. Exiting, the group made their way toward the Loxodon gift shop, and Fia caught sight of a familiar face out of the corner of her eye. One of the pirates of her mother's lost crew. Episode 45, Many Things. Now, the majority of this episode was down to one purchase. Of all the various items they could have brought, around 20 different things, about 12 individual homebrew items, the group split on the decision, bought the deck of Many Things for 19 of the 20 tickets. Timothy believed it might be used to bring his mother back, but Fia and Basil warned that it could also be their undoing, as the deck is very, very dangerous. Skuld and Timothy both drew from the deck, knowing the risks. Skuld empowered himself. Mechanically, he grew 1 level higher than the other group. And Timothy drew the knight, which meant a loyal soldier was on its way to serve him at any cost, a secondary character for him to control in the future. Fia approached the pirate and asked what had happened to her mother. He informed her that Desra, Fia's mother, had captured a stranger a couple of months ago, a ghoul of sorts trying to escape towards Hyloma, the continent to the east. He'd been hunting Cassell, so Desra had ordered her crew with a significant chunk of change to head to Wolfguard in pursuit of the creature. The militia and her left her ship in the hands of her usual crew and went inland all the way through Wolfguard to the Deadlands. They were searching for Cassell, the vampire that had eluded Fia her entire life, but had changed everything when she was a child. Instead, they came across a massive monstrosity at the same time as Cassell, at Pale Brick Tower. Desra took a wound to the gut and was dragged away by Cassell the vampire. The rest of her crew was slaughtered, except for this pirate, who had managed to escape with a few others. Vanning, a tiefling that had turned out to be a cannibal, Rishk, and the stranger that had led them there. They tied up both Vannin and the stranger in an abandoned farmhouse just outside the Deadlands. The pirate also mentioned that he'd been abandoned by Rishk, who had left with the ship and his gold. Before departing, Fabia also managed to steal an item from the circus cart, a foldable clown carriage. When she snuck out with it, she was met by another Largo. After boasting about her theft to the Largo, he disappeared, revealing that he was more than meets the eye, and threatened to take something of hers as she did of his. Episode 46, Blood Trails of a Stranger. On their way north, the group returned to their estate only to find Zalfel, the devil from Advent, waiting in their dining room. He asked for a favor, Timothy to carry a small obsidian chest, but not to look inside at any cost. They just need to hold on to it for a few weeks. Zalfel also tells them that Timothy's mother's her soul was not in the plane of souls, which is where all who die pass to, and nor had it reached any of the afterlives, meaning that she was still in the material plane in some manner, though he does not know what the manner was or where the soul is. He then made a deal with Saphira, asking her to collect 100 worthwhile souls for him, before imbuing her axe with his energy. Fabia made a deal of her own as well that night, beseeching the creature that she had stolen from. It turned out to be a fox-like archfey, also named Lucky. She had said she would steal in his name wherever she could, and he granted some power in return. Timothy made a deal with Fabia and Basil to steal the deck of many things from Saphira, in case she were to pull one and endanger the group. Saphira did not take this lightly, as Fabia easily found it on her person without getting caught. Thea warned Mr. Chambers of the pirate Rishk and his betrayal to her mother's crew. Mr. Chambers agreed to deal with it. And then the group travelled to the farm where the stranger and Vannin were left. There, they were attacked by a Wendigo, formerly Vannin, now possessed by the spirit for his cannibalism, and a lake troll. Between the two, it was a formidable fight, but the party survived. Episode 47, as we go closer to 50, In Stranger Lands. The group entered into the abandoned barn and found the stranger, blood-starved and chained to the wall. They poured out some blood in exchange for his aid and leading them to Palebrick Tower, the area in which Desra's crew had been slaughtered, and Cassell had dragged her away. Approaching the farm, Skovold appeared, played by Sko, our second guest star, a tall, powerful Goliath that had been shunted out of a portal in Fjordhelm and arrived here when hunting an alpha saber-tooth in a cave. He agreed to come with them, had been tracked down Palebrick in search for the portal to return home. The group followed the stranger into the ever-darkened region known as the Deadlands. Here, the clouds themselves let no light pass through. It ever seemed like dusk. Along the road, they came across a shambling undead, and also an abandoned bag of holding next to a corpse, which Timothy tested by putting the obsidian chest into it and pulling it out again, and tipping it upside down. They deemed it to be safe, and he put it inside the chest. When they arrived at Palebrick Tower, the group turned on the stranger to kill him, not wanting to leave a ghoul to roam elsewhere and damage other people's lives. At the same time, Skovold darted straight for the open rift by the fallen tower, before a reddened creature made of muscle and flesh burst through, launching the Alpha Sabertooth's corpse ahead of it. It began to attack the group, and they fought against the abomination, killing both it and the stranger. But before it died, the abomination seemed to recognize the group. Skovold left through the rift, and unbeknownst to the party, returned to his own timeline before the rift closed behind him. Episode 48, Eyes to Black. This was quite a big episode. The party descended into the cellar at Palebrick and found the ramblings of Cassell, various journal entries. They learned that vampires were capable of draining memories with the blood they drank. The stranger was formerly a party of an independent group of monster hunters known as the Silver Torches, and was a considerably evil person. They also learned that Cassell was studying and luring a creature to Palebrick, and it was not the abomination the group had fought, as they found by drawings done by Cassell, but instead a more eldritch being that had escaped him. The only credible bit of information that they had for Cassell's location was the mention of a town nearby, known as Steepglen. They met a group of scouts when heading there, that was led by a lady named Jinxa. They agreed to bring them down to the Deadlands, to Steepglen, but they would need to behave, as a town that can survive in the middle of the Deadlands has to be cautious. The group agreed and decided to head out in the morning, though it was impossible to tell the time of day here in the Deadlands. That night, the scouts drank from a wine bottle they found upon the road. When they arrived in Steepglen, they discovered that it is a town at the base of a glen, surrounded by narrow pathways and a small river running through it. The party made their way toward the main keep on the center island to meet Maria Carnenham, the acting current leader. Upon their way, they meet several more Silvertorch hunters. Mistith, his bear named Hugs, Quetha, an injured druid, Dregger, a hardy dwarven woman, and Visio, a swift dark elf. They had learned that the hunters were helping out in the area and trying to recruit Maria into the Silvertorch Hunters. The group also informed them of the great abomination, the eldritch entity that had previously destroyed Desra's crew. They said they saw something flying in the vast distance. Whilst meeting with Maria, she told them that Cassell leads a town of ghouls some ways out of Steepglen and doesn't seem to bother them. But she would have her scouts help guide them to it. Whilst waiting for the scouts, the group noticed that the town's food supplies had been difficult to upkeep, using daylight spells to try and grow the crops. They met Steingirder, the one who had been casting the daylight spells, and learned that she was a Valkyrie, a creature from a far, far unknown place. She was saddened and indebted to Maria, knowing what was to come soon, helping wherever she can. When the group returned to meet Maria and the scouts, they discovered that each of the scouting parties had actually found wine that night. Each of them had drank a glass of wine, and all of their eyes suddenly turned to black. Around the group and Maria, the scouts spoke as one through the mouth of Ureth, the last of the Illithid, a lieutenant to Magnathor, their greatest enemy. He used their vessels to speak to the group, and told them that a massive force of undead was being lured towards Steepglen from all directions, and demanded they join Magnathor or die. They chose to fight. Episode 49, A Choice Before War, opens with the group fighting and killing off the scouts, learning that they couldn't save them, as they had been infested with worms by Uroth that had been deep embedded into their brains. Maria informed the group that they were vulnerable from 4 directions: an eastern pass that cannot be closed off, a northern pass with ballistae guarding it, a mountain pass to the west, and a river pass to the south. They had enough black powder to blow one of the cliffsides at any of the 3 latter locations, and the party must decide which. They chose the river pass. Down there they encountered a great infested fish creature, along with undead with fish parts weaving across them that could spit out this acidic bile from their stomachs that would lock someone in place. They killed off the creatures and planted the explosive, blowing the pass, and meaning that these creatures wouldn't arrive in the final battle. When they arrived home at Steepglen, Maria had a plan in place. They had to survive till dawn, but they didn't know when dawn would come. Steingirder had a way in which to save them, but needed the sun to rise beyond the blackened clouds. Until then, they had to make more black powder to blow the other 2 routes and hold the eastern way. The group split to defend the town. Saphira, Timothy, and the Silvertorch Hunters were responsible for the western mountain pass. Fia, Scold, some militia, and some soldiers for the northern pass, along with their ballista. And Fabio and Basil, along with catapults and the captain of the guard and some soldiers, for the eastern pass. In the distance, they heard the dead, and creatures under the control of Uroth coming toward them. Episode 50, the last of the episodes for us to have performed, is the Battle for Cloud's Break. The battle began with hordes of undead attacking each of the areas. In the west, Saphira, Timothy, and the Silvertorch Hunters fought against undead, flying creatures that would lift others and drop them from the sky upon also slowing their movement, along with a creature that popped out, a gaunt creature that went for the hearts of its victims. They heard the bomb coming behind them, but during that fight, they lost both Quetha, the changeling druid, and Visio, the dark elf monk. In the north, Fear and Scold fought against hordes of undead, followed by great big worms that seemed to have come from a gargantuan, massive creature, a siege beast that had been controlled by Uroth, making its way towards the town. The ballista tried to fire upon them, but eventually the worm started to overwhelm the ballista. When the bomb arrived, the creature was making its way towards them. In the east, Fabia and Basil were fighting against, again, hordes of undead, but also ghasts which could climb and scale the walls and leave their victims paralyzed. On the ground, forces under the captain of the guard fought back against the creatures valiantly, but they started to become overwhelmed. Eventually, they saved the captain of the guard by lowering down a piece of rope for him to climb up. But in the distance, coming towards them in the east, a pass that they could not close, a massive bone colossus, and all of its bone pieces held together by thousands of worms. Uroth's greatest weapon descending upon the town. And that is where we last left off, the first half of the battle for Cloud's Break. So, with all of that recap done, if you are here from YouTube and you just wanted to get the recap of the whole episode, that's that. You can catch up all of our recaps. I have 3 recaps now, including this one. This one will go up tonight. And with that said, we can begin a Q&A for a little bit. So thank you everyone for your patience if you just sat back and listened to that. I know a lot of people here already probably have watched the episodes, but it just lets anyone who's come in late to be able to look at all of these different recaps and just kind of be up to date for next week. In total, you'll have to listen for about an hour and a half instead of 160 hours or so. So yeah, that's it. We are up to date now with the recap. So Q&A, if you have any questions about any of the episodes or anything that's gone on so far, do type them in the chat. I'll read out your name and read out the question and everything, and I'll answer it to the best of my capability. And then we'll finish up pretty short. Also, I'm going to bring in OG's about, so I might as well get her in for the Q&A. So I'm going to unmute. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So I've got Old Lady Gamer on the comms who plays Fia in the campaign. So if you had any questions during that, just type that now. How much did you expect the Deck of Many Things choice? So, not I would be lying if I said a massive amount, right? Because I prepped a shit ton of extra. I didn't know if they would actually get through the entirety of the circus with all tickets. I thought they might have spent a couple. So I was kind of be like, will they try and steal the Deck of Many Things? More so than could they buy it? Because I was expecting them to be just like 1 or 2 under and then learn that the prize for 19 tickets was the Deck of Many Things.
We could have gotten.
What's up, Summer, by the way? Yeah. So I prepped, I made like 12 homebrew items for that. And, alas,
it was hard to like listen to them all too, because I was taking notes on all of them, right? And I was like, oh shit, this would be super useful. Ooh, this sounds really cool. Okay, well, if we do this and this, and that would be 5. And then, and then we got to the last one. I was like, well, that's out the door.
Yeah, it's I didn't know. I knew that if you had enough tickets, you might have bought it, but I haven't edited Deck of Many Things. Just as a pre-warn, I told the group this a few times. There are things in the Deck of Many Things that are better than the things in the original. There's also things in there which are much, much worse. Much worse. And one of the things I want to make sure is that the players know that going in. I've taken out any of the stuff that's campaign ruining. The good stuff could be like something that really helps you out in this campaign. Big time. So I half expected it, but I thought they might have gone like, hey, let's grab a bunch of this other stuff. Like, there's a lot of options to grab. Are there on Mythos truthers or deniers? Same with Magnathor. Or a lot of these guys unknown to the general public? So on Mythos is actually, for the most part, most people just think he's a myth. On Mythos is a set, as LG knows because she's looked into the books of him. On Mythos in the lore is a purple dragon, it's a chromatic dragon technically, and they see him as a myth in terms of like he's a childhood character. You'd find him in children's books.
Santa Claus, right?
Yeah, he's like, he's essentially like Santa, and so people see him as like a little, or he's more like a cat in a hat. It's like a fun little tale of books where people don't really take too seriously. So going around it, it's like if you were to go up to someone and say, "Hey, I'm looking for the Wizard of Oz," and they're going to treat you a bit ridiculously. Other than ancient creatures, dragons might know he existed, and some scholars found evidence of them existing. But a lot of the actions of Mythos were recorded through bards, and the tales of bards are not always correct. Magnathor, though, is a figure of history, but they didn't really know what happened to him, so the kids' stories aren't really taken seriously as like an actual like on Mythos in the general consensus, didn't defeat Magnathor. Magnathor is kind of a myth of old times. So to an extent, a lot of people won't know who they are. One thing I think is really important in a fantasy setting for me is if you go to a town that doesn't have many people traveling through, or especially villages, I like to think about, like, what would this village know? And a lot of the time, they barely know anything. They might have heard their king's name in the distance. They might not even know their king's name. They just know we're under the rule of this thing. Or they only know the king's name, right? And so the news of that village, the biggest news they've ever had is a merchant that came through and mentioned that he once saw a giant snake. You know, so a lot of people would never have heard of Magnathor or Omnithis, and never even have literature in the villages. So, but in bigger cities, you might find scholars that do.
Like, Thea started asking around, right? Like, in bigger cities and stuff, like, hey, what can you tell me about Omnithis? What can you tell me about Magnathor? And everybody she's asked so far has just kind of, like, patted her on the head almost, like, oh, bless. Okay, yeah, you know, relax yourself. Like, that's so cute that you're asking about that as if they're real.
Yeah, exactly. What's up, God? How you doing? Hello, everyone. We're just doing a Q&A section now. Actually, I should change up the thing to shows Q&A. There you go. Did you have something planned if they went through the time portal? Absolutely not. I expected that they might go through it, and I was like, I can go back and correct myself. It's not years in the future. It's about a year in the future. As reasoning for that, I did it. I was in the moment. I was like, I'm going to reveal it's a time thing. I went, years in the future. I was like, why did I put a plural? If I go back on this sentence now, it's going to sound stupid. I go, actually, I meant a year. Because they don't know that specifically.
I was so excited that we could potentially message, like, baby Scovald, like, in his crib, just like, what's up, little baby?
I expected that they might have gone through the rift, but I also tried to make it look like, hey, might be very dangerous. But I didn't have anything planned for it. If they'd gone through the rift, we would have ended the episode there, and I would have just spent the week going, right, what the fuck has happened in the next year? What can I set up for this? What have they done? Yada, yada, yada. So no, nothing planned. Hi, I always wondered if there ever was a session before episode 1, because it sounded to me like a lot of stuff with the goblins and the altar and freeing the slaves was played in character. Yes. So before session 1, we had a few off-stream sessions, because initially, of the members who are in the game right now, it was only Bree, OG, and Jari, which were originally part of the episode zeros, right? The session zeros. We had Katie and Nicotine, but they couldn't really do the show. And almost Longman as well, who couldn't really do the time, who were going to be in the show as well. And we did a few session zeros because I was teaching OG's first time playing D&D, so it was Jari's. Bree had played once before, and a couple of others had never played before, so I wanted to introduce them to D&D, so we did a couple of session zeros, which was essentially them escaping from imprisonment by slavers, fighting back against them, these bandits, and they came across Silk, the goblin, early on, before heading out on the road. So, yeah, there was a couple of, I think we did 2 or 3, I think it was 2, maybe, session zeros, and that's when...
It was like 3, yeah.
Was it 3? Yeah, and then that's where the name Cockslayers came from, because they killed a cockatrice, and they met a young man named, a young halfling called Penwig.
A cockatrice? Come on, man.
You did kill cockatrices. That's why it's cockatrice. That's why you're cockslayers.
Let's be appropriately impressed with our abilities, please and thank you.
Worse than being imprisoned for eternity? Well, I think the imprisonment in a random location or whatever isn't like, you can always rescue that person, right? Like, you probably couldn't rescue that person for many levels. There is a card in my deck of many things which is capable of losing your character entirely. I won't spoil how, though, but it's a very brutal thing. And I'm always going to open up options where you can save someone in that regard, but I think it would take some time. And it would be, I don't know how you would do it. Did you randomly take out cards for it to be not complete? I didn't randomly. I specifically went through the cards and thought, which of these cards would kind of just ruin the story for them? Which cards are not really that fun? I didn't really like the XP ones because we do milestone XP, so I kept in one that's just a level up, one which is kind of like a level down. In a sense, there's a bit more to it than that. And I just flavored up the deck to make it a little bit better, along with added a few of my own, taking out a few of my own and having some neutral cards in there as well. But you don't know how many cards it is. One thing I don't want to make clear is how many cards the deck of many things currently is. The debate over whether to use the deck or night was both stressful and highly intense, very stressful. It was extremely stressful. Kind of like an Arthurian legend. Yes.
Really stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. Did you have history prepared for them to learn about potentially? History. Wait. Oh, gee. What's that in reference to? Do you think?
With
on Mythos and whatnot, or sorry, Alaska. What did you mean by?
Yeah.
What did you mean by? Do you have history? Which pantheon of gods do you use? Homebrew gods or inspired? The homebrew gods, inspired by the Greek pantheon initially, but all the gods are homebrewed. Essentially, the world for Godforged is a series of other gods which are posted up on Patreon, such as like the triplets, which is where the humans had served under those gods from far places. But the primary gods of Godforged, or the continent is actually called Velreath, are the Godforged. Essentially, there is a forge which is capable of ascending you to godhood, and one of the earliest civilizations here, they chose their greatest among them and became the gods. Gods are essentially just extremely powerful form of mortals in this land, so it's a unique pantheon of all of those. But there's a lot of like inspiration taken from places, which I'm really happy now with the new Greek and Norse campaign I'm doing. I like that they could have had inspiration because it means it's kind of linked. But like Xeros is kind of Zeus in a sense. They're not, in terms of personality, I've not really taken much the same, except for Aedon, who's a little bit more like Loki. But a lot of them are kind of being inspired by some of my favorite gods of like mythologies. Okay. Hope there are recordings of that. I think I have recordings somewhere, Suzzwater, of our session zeros, but I'd have to find them. And I think I might have lost them when my hard drive failed.
And I don't think you recorded all of them, right? I think it was just like one of them, as
one.
I recall.
But I might have lost it, so I can't guarantee.
But I do, like I said, I do have... I took notes, obviously, and we keep talking about doing something with them, and then we just keep not really doing it. So maybe at some point.
Is there something you made?
Going through the time portal, by the way.
Oh, going through the time portal. Do I have history? I have ideas of what could happen over the next year, but I probably would have designed a lot of that over the course of the week. One thing that DMs don't often reveal, and I think it's something which we should always talk about, because I think a lot of people get put off with the idea of DMing because they think it's like this broad plan that you have across the entire thing. But sometimes you just throw a rope out there and have no clue what's at the end of it. And when they take it, you're like, okay, I'll end the session there, and then I'll work out what's at the end of that rope by the next week we play. That was the time skip was definitely one of those. I had no idea what was in the other end of there. I've got a couple of ideas of what would happen, but I would be able to go like, okay, Magnathor, he's been around for a year now, nothing's been hunting him. What would happen there? What would happen with the war going on in Kessex between Westmourne and Kessex? And go through all of the different things and kind of be like, right, tick, 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 this happened. So one thing just to take note of is like, yeah, I have no idea a lot of the stuff like that. So with history like that, I would have probably made it up then and thought about it and said, like, what makes sense for the world? If there's Jumps asks, is there something you made that your players will never see now that you're really proud of? Nothing that they will never see, but there's...
I asked something similar the other day, right? Like,
yeah. There is definitely moments where when the whole campaign wraps up, I can't wait to go back and be like, hey, by the way, you missed this. There's about 3 or 4 significant ones where like it's information that would be interesting. There's something that'll come up soon where I'll probably tell them and be like, hey, by the way, you would have discovered this earlier, but this happens. But yeah, about 3 or 4 times. I can't really mention anything. I don't know if there's anything that they didn't like, which would be not a spoiler. Like something they couldn't discover later now that they didn't come across, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's anything like I can reveal with that, because there's a couple of places which I know that if I was to say now and the players learn now, it'd kind of matter. The older episodes of Godforged are on YouTube, right? Yes. All here, I believe.
Is there? I can't remember our command. Oh, there you go.
Is it just that?
No, I think it's maybe this one.
Yeah, there it is.
There we go.
Yes, I mean, it's practically the only thing I upload at the moment until I do my next campaigns. So they're all up there now. You said earlier that you didn't want to release them. Yeah, I don't know if I have them still. It's also a bit more awkward because I feel a bit bad if like the players aren't involved anymore. I'd have to get permission from the players that were once in the session zeros. I'm currently prepping for DMing level 7 to 9 in the campaign, so I was trying to hear. Fun. Yeah, cool. Nice. Face-to-face DMing for sure, but I think online DMing takes more preparation than that. For sure, yeah. It's a little harder because you have to make the maps, right? And you have to make it look nice. DMing is also a good bit of improv. No DM will always have everything prepared. There are just some things that need to be set on and format. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things of recent weeks, because I think so many DMs look up to him, was Matthew Mercer saying two things. One, that he doesn't prep everything. He has like a couple of notes for like a location if they might go there, right? And he was discussing that that's kind of what he did with campaign 2 when they went into the Eastern Province with all of the Bright Queen and stuff, right? Like none of that was his traditional where he thought they would go. And so seeing Matt Mercer admit that is really good, I think, for DMs as a whole. And he also mentioned like he would sometimes have plot points that he thought of later, or the players would almost start to work out, and then he'd be like, yo, that's better than what I had. I'm going to do that. That sounds better. And so I think some DMing comes in like that. And I thought the time, if they went through the time portal, it would have been very much like that. Yeah, no, I understand, McFluffy, yeah. Do you ever put NPCs in places with the explicit known that players will try to flirt with them? No, but I will say when I make NPCs now, I mean, there's always the idea that I know that they might hit on one, right? Like I know if I throw in a tiefling, Saphira is probably gonna hit on it. I know that if I throw in like a kind of a like a bit of a cheeky dude, OG's probably gonna hit on it. I know that Basil's probably gonna go for sweet people. Scold's probably gonna fuck any bear that I throw in there. No, I'm kidding. Fabio's gonna fuck the world.
Yeah.
But I will always now when I make an NPC that I know is going to have more than like one line of dialogue, like a pre-thought out NPC, I think about their sexuality and their preference, just in case, because they can't fuck everyone, right? There's going to be some people who are
we could try
asexual. There's going to be some people who are gay, some people who are straight. There's it's going to be a whole merging of things. Some people who are pan, and so I kind of think about that and think about if they did try it on, how they would react instead of just being caught off guard every time they want to bang them.
Not everyone, NPCs aren't there solely for us to just flirt with, right? Like they get to say no too, and they get to have
that's true,
like,
yeah.
you know.
I think it makes it more realistic, right? Like you can be a flirty person in real life, but not everyone's going to flirt back, and I think that's quite fun. But some of them definitely they'll bang. Improv is
how come?
Things like
wait, I have a question having to do with this. NPCs. Why do you sometimes still look surprised when me especially, but everybody else is too, but I know I do it for every single thing. When I'm like, what's her name? How come you still sometimes look surprised? Like you didn't think I was going to ask, hey, what's their name? What's that horse's name? What's that Lily-Poly's name? What's that guard's name?
Well, a lot of the time I do have their name. But the way, I don't know. Maybe if it's just a random one, I'm like, shit, I need to come up with a name now. I think because you guys have called me out on forgetting names so many times now that I'm always going to be in a state of panic, even if it's written in front of me. Also, the way I write my notes is I really should organize them. I've got like a way of organizing my mind that works for like an episode in DMing. But sometimes I'll write the name for the first time in the middle of a paragraph. So you'll be like, what's your name? And I'll go, huh? And that'd be me scrolling into the paragraph.
In all of my notes.
Yeah, I really should. I should have like a compendium of the names, but I don't.
I bullet out like sometimes that we get.
Sometimes I'll go into a paragraph and you'll be like, what's your name? And I'll be like, okay. Scroll through the paragraph, quickly find the name, and I'll be like, my name, yes. Oh, it's Jinxa. And that just happens. We can only get a few more questions in, by the way, chat, because I've got to shoot in 10 minutes. My asexual friend flirts with anything alive. That's fair. I've also got an asexual friend that doesn't flirt with any. I've never seen them flirt. So, like, I think it's just going to come down to, like, character preference. How would Scold flirt?
Yeah, he spars. Remember that whole conversation? Yeah.
Can you make the important things right in text?
He's trying to tell Basil to spar with Abby.
This is the thing. I don't know what's going to be important. I'll throw in a name. This guard here will accept the quest. And I'll never throw it in red because I don't think he's an important guard. So, I just forget, to be honest. But yeah.
Everyone's important.
We're now at episode 50, which is pretty crazy. We've only got 2 more episodes to go. No, I'm kidding. That's it. Yeah. So far, when you think of the scale of things, I mean, I won't reveal some of the other story beats which I have in mind. But in like their current main overarching objective, outside of their origin stories, which have links in, like right now we're pursuing Fear's origin story and kind of one of the key points with it, which is Cassell. Outside of their origin stuff, and each of them has like some have less than others. Like Fabia doesn't have as much, and Basil doesn't have as much as some of the others. We're like kind of like long stories and stuff to kind of beat in their past. Although Basil doesn't have actually a bit here. No, that's a lie. In terms of that hunt for Magnathor, you've still got 3 of his lieutenants alive.
We just killed one dude at the very beginning when they escaped before we could do anything. Like that's all that we've done.
Yeah, you've got Magnathor, you've got his right hand Yule, you've got his left hand Uven, the Krigven, and then you've got the Abishai, the Rakshazar, and you're currently going after Yillithid.
Yep.
So all of that, I mean, and going through this was 15, this last 15 episodes, 16 episodes, were all in Wolfguard at the base of pursuing the Illithid. And it could still be another 10 episodes before we even get close to that. So I do still see us, there's definitely like a lot of story to still go through and hunt down. So we're still in the early stages of the show. It's crazy. Do you take note out of your players' preferred strategies when you make encounters, or do you try to avoid using that as meta knowledge? I mix and match. Not really, to be honest. I'll sometimes just think of a cool monster and I'll think what makes sense for that monster. Sam has thought that I've done that with grappling before, but I actually really haven't. Only ever on a couple of creatures have I ever done that to kind of mix up the strategy, because I know that like maybe one thing could destroy it. But not really. I don't think there's many game-breaking mechanics that you can really do as much. Like, obviously, I don't abide by like some stuff like the polymorph thing where you can drown someone in polymorph technically by the rules and shit, right? So I never really worry about the mechanics they're going to do when I'm designing a monster. I mean, sometimes when I'm designing a dungeon or a fight, I'll think about like, hey, what does this person usually do? And see if they can work out how to like, or like find a spell in their spell lists and go like, they usually prep this, but they don't get to use it. Let's think about how I can work this into a fight that they might be able to use it in there. I do that sometimes, but most of the time I'm just designing a monster because I think, hey, it sounds cool if this like, take the Gaunt one who goes for hearts. I was like, that's already a mechanic in the thing. How can we improve this more? Okay, maybe if he eats a heart, he gains a power, you know? So it's all gonna depend on the creature. Not fucking bat in a good way. I think that's very D&D to me. I think when D&D goes straight for the objective all the time, I think it's less D&D for me. I feel like a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, you just don't do much a lot of the time. You learn small things, you hang out, you learn each other's characters, and you build depth.
Too, like as a player, right? Obviously, we know plot hooks that are getting dropped, and you want to follow those. But I think there's a compulsion, like to know everything about everything. First of all, as a history of playing video games, right? But then just also as a person in the world, like I would ask 5,000 fucking follow-up questions and be like, wait, what about this? Is this connected? Wait, hold on. Because that's the kind of person I am, right? But then you still feel this sense of like impending kind of doom and terror over the fact that time is marching on. But now I have like 5 things that probably we should follow up on, but like which one is important and whatever. And it like, I don't know, it does make it feel more real, I think.
Yeah. Question probably not to be answered. Was the flesh monster they fought with the time traveler related to the blood ooze from the giant they fought at Magnathor's tomb? That is a question that is not to be answered. Yeah, you are correct in asking that. I can't remember anything about that creature yet. There'll be a time where I can.
Good question. I can't tell you shit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have to play the politician. I can't say anything yet. But you'll find out.
Or what if I deafen?
No, because I can't let the chat know. Because if they type it in chat when you do an episode. But yeah, you'll find out. Somewhat soon, I imagine, because it's all, interlinked. Was or is there ever a time you vividly recall wanting to fudge the roll, but I had to resist? None that I vividly recall, but I have definitely fudged a couple of rolls. None that I resisted, not necessarily. When it usually... fudging a roll has to happen very, very rarely. And honestly, it's usually during early play when the character's level 3 or 4, maybe 5. And it would be like, I've made this creature a little too strong, and I'm realizing it could one-hit them, and I've gone, okay, midway through, I've gone, okay, this damage die is probably too high. Let's just lower this or something like that. So a little bit of that kind of stuff on the row. But none of the significant moments, especially not now. Past like level 5, the characters are clean and you're fine. You're never going to have a monster that does like one hit any of them or anything like that. And balancing actually gets a little easier around this point to me. In favor of the players. I can't think of a time where any fudge roll could come up in any social situation. So I don't think other than that, a couple of times early on when I was getting balanced down properly, probably then, but never for something really important. Yeah, I'm the same way, McFluffy. I think fudge and roll occasionally. Like when I say occasionally, on the rarest occasions, I think you have to kind of play as the dice go. But if you've also fucked up, like which usually a fudge roll usually kind of accounts for that. If I put in a creature which just hits way too hard, and I was like, oh crap, you know. It's fun. DC for a social roll. Yeah, I've definitely lowered those on my head a couple of times maybe, but that'd be it. Or if I've gone like make a roll here, and then when I've asked them to make a roll, I've thought to myself, it's probably pretty obvious, or they're probably really easy to persuade. It's not really going to aid the story if they fail this persuasion roll, so I'll lower the DC down to like nothing really for flavor.
Oh, that's a good question.
Another question. Never really understood why that giant in the Crothic nest wanted to die. Was he somehow ashamed because he created the army?
That poor dude.
Yes. Essentially, yes. The giants in Godforged are very misunderstood. A lot of them are cruel, but a lot of them are also pretty honorable creatures. Not only he designed the army, he had been feasted on, he'd been used by the dwarves, and well, not necessarily just the dwarves, but he'd been used in that kind of way, and he recognized what he'd created, but also he wanted to die with a little bit of honor, and he realized he couldn't fight anymore. And he was from a clan, I believe it was a fire giant. He was from a clan of essentially fighters. Fire giants are kind of renowned for their prowess, and he realized that he was way too injured to fight. He's way too injured to fight. In places like Wolfguard, you might find a giant with prosthetic items and limbs and magical prosthetics, as they are a little further ahead with magic and technology mixed than other nations. But down in Kessex, he probably wouldn't have had much of a chance, especially not as a giant. Maybe as a person with some like imported goods, but getting crit twice on level 2 and almost dying can be demoralizing. Yeah, I don't think that makes for good storytelling and stuff, right? Like getting close to death as a low level works, or if say for example, you have a barbarian, they go reckless on an enemy, the enemy strikes back, and then they do it again the next round. I think if you then crit that round, you're like, well, look, it's not even necessarily crit, but you get to a point where they fall down, they die. They've had enough room. Whereas if you open with like a level 4 encounter and the enemy shoots a fireball and you realize you just rolled 56 damage and all of their health is lower than that, you might just go, I'm gonna bring that down to about half its amount and show it as like, hey, this is still a huge hit and you guys could be vulnerable, but at least you have a turn to think about it. I think that's my problem with D&D when rolls come into it, and balance is give the players a time to react. If they don't perform a good strategy, then go with the rolls. But if you've like rolled really high in your first round as a multi-attack, you can be like, I'll drop it down a little bit and see how they perform against this thing. All right, chat. Well, I'm going to have to probably leave it there because the Euros final game is about to kick off. Thank you so much, everyone who came out to this. I'll be uploading this onto YouTube straight after, mid time. And I'll post it up there, put it into the list of Godforged stuff. Thanks so much for coming out to the recap. Sorry there's no episode today. We will be back next week for the second half of the Battle of Clouds Break, where we get to see what happens with that one. It's been fun. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. Appreciate it. And I'll see you all on the morrow. Ta-ta.